Stella, ella, hola, YouTube. I am biting off more than I can chew with this video because I've got more than my regular 5 items, which takes me so long to explain normally. And most of them are games, though, which I tend to do quicker than other things, so I'm going to try it. First up, in the summertime, I started this tradition last year. I have 2 books going at any given time during the summer. One is kind of my inside book, and the one that I take to work, which no longer applies right now. And the other one is the book I read exclusively outside by the edge of the pool, kind of out in nature and that sort of thing. So the theme this year is classic literature. Last year it was a lot of Canadiana, mostly hockey books, Don Cherry, Cujo, Killer, and then also the Tragically Hip mixed in there. So a lot of it was a very Canadian kind of first edition. And this year I've decided to go with classic literature because I found a bunch of older books on sale at Chapters last year for like $6 each. So I bought 4 of them and thought this would be perfect for next summer. So first one, Classic Tales of Horror. 20 short tales from Edgar Allan Poe, who is back in the day was thought of as a very scary writer. His stories were horror and suspenseful and stuff. All these years later, I'm not so sure they're that scary these days, rather than more mysterious and suspenseful. And to be honest, it's almost like reading Shakespeare with some of that old language. Like a lot of times I'm going, what the hell does he mean right now? So some of the stories were kind of lost on me. Others were not. A big theme among many of them is a guy whose wife passes away and comes back to life and kind of haunts him, sort of thing. That's a really common theme amongst his stuff. Being buried alive, that sort of thing, and others. Now I'm gonna go through here and kind of gloss over a few of my favorites. The first is The Fall of the House of Usher, which a guy, as he gets older, not old, but later in life, when he's an adult, goes to revisit a childhood friend at his big estate, which always gave the author the creeps as a kid. And apparently his friend is in ill health, so he comes to kind of hang out with his friend and make him feel better. And during this time, the host's sister dies and comes back to haunt the two of them, and then the whole house kind of vanishes, sort of thing. So it's a really weird story, but very cool. Next one was The Mask of the Red Death. This royal person decides to take 1,000 of his closest friends into his palace during a time of plague and block out the outside world so they can all remain safe, but the plague comes and hunts him within his own refuge, sort of thing, which was a very cool story. Possibly my favorite was The Pit and the Pendulum, where during the Inquisition, a prisoner is put in this pit that has all sorts of booby traps, and just by sheer dumb luck and his own ingenuity, ends up escaping in the end when he's had all of these very close calls to death. The next one, The Black Cat. This guy who's an animal lover as a kid, who's very empathetic and loving, has all these animals, and his wife supports him in this habit, and she also loves animals. But as he grows older, he finds he's starting to hate his animals, all except his one favorite cat, a big black cat. But even the cat starts to wear on him after a while, and he does this vile thing to it and kills it, when eventually a cat very much looking like the one he killed comes back to him and ends up ruining him. So, a very cool story. The Oblong Box, a story of a guy who has an artist friend, and they go sailing on a ship to New York, and during the voyage, the artist friend is very sullen and withdrawn, and he's kind of focused around this big wooden box he's brought with him, which nobody knows what's inside of it. So as the journey unfolds and the ship eventually becomes a wreck and starts to sink, the author later comes to know what exactly was going on with this artist and his box, who ultimately perishes in the shipwreck. Last one, which was the last story of the collection, was called Hop Frog, and it takes place in like medieval times, I guess, where a king, his favorite dwarf Hop Frog, who entertains him and all of his courtly advisors, who also takes a lot of abuse from the king. Finally, the king takes one liberty too many on him and his other dwarf friend Tripetta, and the two of them set up this this practical joke, which is anything but a practical joke, and will make sure that Hop Frog and Trippetta never suffer abuse from the hands of this king ever again. So, the first book of my classic literature series was probably going to be the hardest one to understand, but I did take away a lot of interesting stories from it, and I'm probably richer and more cultured from having read it. Next up, we're switching to some movies. Me and Jimmer watched Night at the Roxbury, based on the Saturday Night Live sketch by Will Ferrell and Chris Kattan. These two guys, they made this feature-length movie out of it, and they're basically these two brothers, Steve and Doug Butabi, who live in Los Angeles. They're maybe in their 20-somethings, still living at home. Their parents are loaded, and they're just kind of these good-for-nothing kind of guys that go out to the club all the time, try and hit on chicks, get rebuffed. And their main goal in life is to get into the Roxbury, which is this very hot club, but they always get rejected by the bouncer, who is played by Michael Clarke Duncan. Now, just their father is always on them because he thinks they're useless. They work at his synthetic flower shop, and their father's dream is to have Steve, who was played by Will Ferrell, he's the dumber of the brothers, marry Emily, who is the daughter of another shop owner that borders the flower shop, and eventually start a big family business, knock down the wall between the shops, and create a joint shop, synthetic flowers on one side, lighting on the other, and combine the two into this mega store. Steve always rejects Emily, though, and Doug hates Emily, so Doug is kind of the ringleader in pushing back their father and all of his ideas. And one night, after a big blowout at the house, they go out clubbing, and they finally get into the Roxbury because Richard Grieco, an actor, rear-ends them in his Ferrari Testarossa, and not wanting a lawsuit, gets the guys into the club. And while they're there, they actually talk to the club's owner, I forget his name, and they tell him all these ideas they have about the clubs, and the owner really seems to like these guys. They spend the night with him, go to his house and party, and but they piss off the owner's limo driver, who, when they go to see the owner at his office the next day, this guy intercepts them and turns them away, saying he doesn't want to talk to you. But in the meantime, this guy wants to talk to them because they had all these great ideas. So then their world kind of starts to unravel from there. A marriage is kind of arranged between Steve and Emily, which causes Doug to hate Steve, and there's this big falling out between the two brothers. But after Steve marries Emily and she starts changing everything about him in his life, he's like, what am I doing? So in the end, the two brothers find a way to reconcile and get in touch with the owner of the club, and eventually kind of come out of it all the happier in the end, and establish and realize their long-standing dream of owning their own club and being in the club business. So, very funny movie. Next up, I've made some questionable movie parenting decisions lately, but here's just another one of them. But what do you do during a lockdown, right? Snakes on a Plane. Oh my god. Classic cult movie starring Samuel L. Jackson. Story is in Hawaii. This kid named Sean, who's driving his motorbike around, witnesses a murder of this kind of criminal crime boss in Los Angeles, who's in Hawaii at the time, murder a district attorney from Los Angeles for something. And so Sean escapes, but these guys see him. Eddie, Kim, and his henchmen see him, and they're pursuing him and trying to murder him so he can't squeal. And that is when Sean is rescued by a U.S. agent named Neville Flynn, who's played by Samuel L. Jackson. And he's like, these guys are coming for you. All you can do is come to Los Angeles with me, testify, put this guy away for life. Otherwise, if you don't say anything, they're going to kill you. So Sean finally relents, and they end up boarding this giant jumbo jet from Honolulu to Los Angeles. But Eddie Kim, not wanting this plane to ever land, enacts this scheme where, because they're cold-blooded, he gets a whole batch of poisonous snakes from around the world put into the cargo hold on this plane, and a timer to go off to let these snakes free at a certain point during the flight. And to help make the snakes attack everybody, all the lays they give the passengers upon boarding the plane, he has a guy working at the airport, and he sprays these lays with all these pheromones that will make the snakes super aggressive, so all the passengers are wearing these things. And of course, during the flight, the timer goes off, the snakes are released, At first, nobody realizes what's going on. They just think there's these random accidents when some of the breakers trip. Pilot goes down to check it out, gets bit by a snake. Nobody sees the snake. They think he has a heart attack. So at first, nobody realizes there's actually all these snakes loose. There's just these weird random accidents. But eventually, the snakes are released into the cabin en masse, and the rest of the flight is just survival kind of story of all these people as they try to navigate these dangerous waters with all these poisonous snakes in the cabin. Tons of people die, but the survivors find a way to get the plane to LA and hopefully land it, because both of the pilots go down. So it's this suspenseful, hilarious, violent affair in the air, and it's just a classic movie. It didn't gain as much traction as it should have, because it is amazing, but it does have this big cult following, and it's got some really great talent in it. Julianne Margulies is the main flight attendant, Claire. Samuel L. Jackson, of course, one of the best actors of all time. It's also got, I don't know how you spell his last name, or say his last name, but David Koechner or Keckner or whatever. He's in all the Will Ferrell movies, like in Anchorman and stuff like that. He's amazing. Todd Packard on The Office, the U.S. version of The Office. That's who he is. He's amazing. And a few others too. So if you haven't seen it, it's got some language, it's got some violence, but if you love all that kind of stuff like I do, it'll be right up your alley. Next up, finally showed James this movie. I only had it on VHS, so I hadn't been able to watch it with him up until I upgraded it recently. But as a kid myself, I watched this movie bazillions of times. Wayne's World. Indeed party time, and indeed excellent. This movie stars Mike Myers and Dana Carvey as Wayne Campbell and Garth Algar, two best buds in their 20s maybe, who live in Aurora, Illinois, and don't have much going for them, but they do have a public access television show called Wayne's World, where the two go on, just talk about stuff and be their regular goofy selves, and it's picking up traction. A lot of people watch it and really like it, and it's just the two guys being themselves and all their buddies helping them tape the show and stuff. A TV exec named Benjamin, who's kind of a douche, sees the show one night and goes, "Oh, that's perfect," because he has this client named Noah who owns a chain of arcades called Noah's Arcade, and he wants the arcade needs a way to get all the new machines that are coming into the arcade news of this out to their target audience, and they think a spot on Wayne's World will be the perfect way to do this. So before they even have talked to Wayne and Garth, Benjamin and his assistant Russell say to Noah, "We'll get you on this show. We own this show," basically, assuming that they're just going to be able to take it. So they drive to Aurora, all in the hopes of meeting up with Wayne and Garth and purchasing the rights to the show. In the meantime, Wayne and Garth are just in the process of wrapping up their latest show and hitting the town. They go to Stan Mikita's Donuts first, then they go to a heavy metal venue called the Gasworks, where they see this band called Crucial Taunt lay down a set, and Wayne falls in love with the lead singer slash bassist, Cassandra, played by Tia Carrere, who is hot. As he tries to awkwardly start his courtship of her at the Gasworks, Benjamin and Russell finally arrive in Aurora soon after and approach Wayne and Garth, and the contract is signed to buy the show. Wayne's all in because he dreams of doing Wayne's World as a career, whereas Garth is a little more, what's this guy doing? This is weird. So he's a little more trepidatious about it. But soon enough, the guys each have a check for $5,000. They're out spending money. Wayne gets the Stratocaster he's always wanted at the music store. Him and his relationship with Cassandra's going great. So everything's looking up. In the meantime, though, Benjamin and Russell are making all these changes to Wayne's World, and Benjamin is also trying to sign Crucial Taunt and make a music video for them, all with the purpose of stealing Cassandra out from under Wayne. So eventually, as these things start to build and build and build, and as they film their first Wayne's World show and they make all these changes to it, and Wayne responds by embarrassing Noah, the sponsor, on the show. He gets fired from the show, has a falling out with both Cassandra and Garth, and is kind of left alone, wallowing in his own self-pity. But he soon picks himself up, goes and reclaims his best friend and makes up with him, and then him and all of his buds enact this plan to screw Benjamin, get Cassandra back and get Wayne's World back. So such a fun, goofy movie. And when you look back on, again, a Saturday Night Live sketch brought to life on the big screen, and you think back to the cast they had back then in the early 90s. I mean, Chris Kattan and Will Ferrell from Night at the Roxbury, Dana Carvey and Mike Myers, other guys that make cameos in this movie. Chris Farley was in there for a brief scene. He was on the show. You think back to Tommy Boy, David Spade, Adam Sandler, Phil Hartman, Chris Rock, Molly Shannon, who was in Night at the Roxbury. Like, there's just so many people that were on that era of that cast that it's crazy. You'll never see a cast as good as that again, I'm sure. And it spawned such beauties as this. Now, another cameo I really loved in this movie was Ed O'Neill, who played one of the cashiers at the Stan Mikita's Donuts. Married with Children is my favorite sitcom of all time, so I love Ed O'Neill, and to see him in the movie, it's just fantastic. And also the hockey references with Mike Myers being Canadian, all the Blackhawks stuff, and Officer Koharski being named after, the famous referee. Just a brilliant piece of cinema right there. Last, we've got a series of games that we recently finished. First up, Wreckfest from THQ Nordic. We were looking forward to this game for so long, and it took so long for it to come out. But basically, it's just kind of a smash-up derby game. And it was released by THQ Nordic. So all the tracks take place in kind of Scandinavia. Like, I don't know if in all the countries, but like Norway, Sweden, Finland, that area of the world. It's small track, smash-em-up racing. A lot of dirt tracks. You get out there, you're in these old beater cars, and it's no holds barred. You're putting people into posts and into the forest, and your main goal most of the time is to win the race, but you can do it any way you want. As you take damage, it's real life physics. So if you get your side bashed in and your wheels are wonky, you're gonna pull to a certain side. Everything is kind of, the damage is real, and the effects it has on the car is very real. So you have to be a good racer to win the races in these games. It's very difficult, and you have to balance that need for winning and staying clean versus that urge to smash people and get revenge on people who get all up in your grill, right? So it's very difficult. So there's different kind of racing events, series and stuff like that, point series or one-offs and stuff like that. But then there's also very strange events like couch racing. There's smash-up derbies where you're just smashing and want to be the last man standing. There's big rigs you can race. There's double-decker cars and motorhomes. There's so much stuff in this game, and it's all about smashing and racing, and it is so much fun. If you haven't played this game, but you love racers, any kind of racers, get it. It is so much fun. Next up, Deadpool, the game. James wasn't allowed to play this game, of course, but I did, and it is so much fun. It's simple. There's only 8 or 9 levels, although they do get hard. Halfway through the game, they suddenly get very hard. The premise behind the game is that Deadpool wants to make a video game, and he kind of strong-arms this company into doing it for him, and so he goes out, and you're not sure where the lines are blurred, right? Like, is this actually going on, or is this all staged for the game? So it's kind of this adventure where you set about getting to the final boss, who in this game is Mr. Sinister, I guess is his name. I'm not really familiar with him, but he's the main boss in the game, and you fight through the game to get towards him, but you take down other bosses along the way. But it's during the game, there's all this funny stuff about him blowing the budget for the game, so all of a sudden the graphics go shitty or they go 8-bit. And there's all these kind of in-jokes about that sort of thing along the way. So it's very unique and very funny and very creative. And you also fight alongside the X-Men for part of it. Wolverine's heavily mentioned in the game and involved a little bit. And also Psylocke, Rogue, and one more. I forget. Domino is also in the game. So there's a few other characters and stuff like that. Cable's also in the game, and in the back and forth between him and Deadpool is very funny. So, and of course it's very raunchy, dirty, bad language, boobies and stuff like that. So I had a lot of fun with it, and it's a very quick hack and slash game, but they have some a lot of weapon upgrades. Like you can get you have your swords, of course. You can also get size, and then these sledgehammer things. There's 4 different guns you can get. There's grenades and bear traps and stuff like that. And a lot of the weapons you can upgrade along the way. But it's not hard like it is in Fortnite, where you have all these blueprints and you need resources and shit. It's a very simple upgrading system, very easy to operate, and a lot of fun too. So everything about the game is very good. The only downside to it is that it's a little bit short. But when a game is this much fun and that funny and stuff, then it doesn't really matter. So, and I think it's also very cheap now. So if you like superheroes, Deadpool is probably one of the best of them. So it's a no-brainer in my opinion. Next up, this is a download I got with some of my leftover Nintendo money a while back. You'll recall Blaze Rush, which I reviewed a while ago. This one is called R.I.V.E. In it, you control Roughshot, who is kind of this space explorer slash salvager, and he's got this spider mech that he travels in, and it can shoot in all directions. So like when you're controlling it, the left stick controls your movement, and then the right stick is just, you can fire simultaneously in all directions around, sort of thing. So you find this ship and you get trapped in it, and there's this artificial intelligence in it that's seemingly wants to keep you there and is being a dick and is giving you all these problems. So you have to find a way to escape this ship, and along the way you can hack all these different objects that help you advance along the way, and then the cool thing about it is that the action is all held to this one ship, which isn't all that big. So you're revisiting areas of the ship time after time, but there's always something different about it. One part, you know, it can be filling with water, so you can jump higher than you were the last time when you went through it without water, so you can get to different areas, that sort of thing. Other times it's filled with fire and you have to escape the fire and stuff like that. So it's very creatively done, very simple as well. There is you do earn XP that you can spend on weapon upgrades and stuff like that, and different secondary weapons. You have your blaster that you fire all around, but then you'll also have up to 4 special weapons that you can acquire that will help you along the way. And all the bosses, or all the enemies in the game, I guess, are all like some sort of robotics, right? So yeah, eventually you just have to find your way out of this ship and gain your freedom and take all the salvage that you can along the way with you. So very fun, and super cheap too. It's like Deadpool and Wreckfest. That's 3 no-brainers in a row. Last up, me and Jimmer just finished this. We love Skylanders. Skylanders Trap Team is the latest game to fall. The story on this one is that long ago in Skylands, living in the Savage Lands and always attacking the Skylands was a gang of no-gooders called the Doom Raiders. A special branch of Skylanders during that time called the Trap Team or something like that. Well, the game's called Trap Team. Caught these Doom Raiders and encased them in Cloud Cracker Prison. Now, all these years later, Chaos has the mind to set them free in order to help them finally take over Skylands, which he has been so unsuccessful in doing all these other times. Only they turn on him, and Chaos is forced to kind of align temporarily with the Skylanders and help them take down the Doom Raiders. So yeah, it's just a typical Skylanders adventure. You play through all the story levels using all the Skylanders you can, level them up along the way, and just face all the bosses, face all the levels, and put those Doom Raiders back where they belong. This being, I think, the second last Skylanders game that have been released up to date, as far as I know. It's great because we can use, with the exception of the Skylanders Superchargers, because they're the vehicle-based game and not the regular ones, you can use any Skylander from any game that has preceded this one. So we had so many characters we could use. So when you die a couple times, you're not going, oh, I've only got a couple Skylanders left. Are we going to be able to do this, right? So we had so many to choose from. And at this point, too, a lot of them were getting very heavily upgraded, so they're also very powerful. So we used this game not only as a fun game to play, but also, especially the the bonus modes where you gain so much XP and stuff, we used it as a vessel to upgrade all of the other Skylanders we have. All of them now have all of their weapon paths upgraded fully, and a lot of them also have all of their different XP levels up to the maximum of level 20. A good chunk of them are up to level 20 now, so we still have some that we need to upgrade. But right now we have a pretty impressive fleet of Skylanders on our hands after this game. So again, lots of fun. They introduced new little changes. Like in this one, the trap team was that you had these little traps where you defeated a boss, then you could put him into the trap, and then you could call on them to fight for you for brief periods during the game. So the gist of the games are kept the same throughout, but they add these little things to each game that make them stand out and a little unique from the one that came before it. So, which I really like. It's such a fun game series that you don't need to make any changes. So I appreciate that they have kept the essence of these games the same along, and it's such a fun series to play, and the whole interactivity of the toys on the portal just adds that extra element of fun to it. So that is all for now. That was a big one, but I tried to go through it as fast as I could so you don't get bored and I don't lose space on my phone. So until next time, have a great rest of the week.